2 years ago, we started a business and almost immediately began making $10,000 plus a month.
I will never forget the first day we made $1,000.
Making custom handmade gnomes.
I was in the cabin with Chad and I was looking at my phone. We were just about to put Grayson to sleep. He was, I guess, about a year old at the time. And I told Chad, we just made $1,000 today. And it would not be the last day that we made that much money.
It paid the bills. In fact, it paid the bills so much that we were able to implement scarcity marketing.
I feel like Chad's going to say a better bit about scarcity marketing, so I'll just let you say that.
Which is where our demand is so much higher than the supply. So what we did every day was gnome drops. We would release 10 or 20 gnomes, and the first person to get there and say sold in the comments got the gnome. This was great for a while until people started getting upset that they couldn't get gnomes. They were contacting Zaina saying, please, how do I get one of your gnomes? I can't get there fast enough. So then we even started a group where you could receive text messages on your phone 5 minutes before the gnome drop. This kind of evened the playing field and allowed everybody to be there at the same time to comment or fight over the gnomes. Zaina and I came from being struggling entrepreneurs, making really not very much money at all.
This was during the time of COVID, right? A little time we all remember and are trying to forget. We were on unemployment benefits because Chad lost his job at the start of the pandemic, right when Grayson was born. We were in a tiny little apartment, just insane, like not a lot of savings, lost our job, tiny little human to take care of, parents for the first time. It was such a wild experience. And for the gnomes to come out of that, I think that we were coming at it from not necessarily a holistic perspective of what we wanted to do to make money or for our future or how we wanted to spend our time or how we might want to add to this world. At that particular moment, we were responsible for a newborn.
We left our basement apartment in Boise, Idaho and moved into a standalone 2-bedroom on the central coast of California.
I'll never forget us sitting in the car in Utah. I think we were out camping and trying to figure out like where's the best place in the country to live. We had already lived in Boulder, we had lived in Hawaii, and there were ups and downs of both of those places, but we had never done California. So we packed our bags with our little 1-year-old Grayson in tow, and we just drove out to California, not even knowing like where we were going to live. We ended up in a town called San Luis Obispo, gorgeous, right on the coast.
And it was at that point that we found ourselves working like 10, 12-hour days, making these gnomes, marketing these gnomes, doing everything we could to make ends meet, and the real goal was to try to save money to get some land.
So basically, if one of us wasn't working on making the gnomes or doing shipping or customer service or any shopping for the things that we needed, then we were watching Grayson.
It was about 3 months into living in California that I had a bit of a crisis of consciousness, I would say. It's almost as if I was looking down for the past 6 months, and then I just lifted my head up and saw what I've been doing. You know, if you go back to 2017 Living Zeal videos, you'll see a couple who has a philosophy about never giving their time up for money, for frivolous expenditures, and always working towards your zeal, always focusing your time towards what you're passionate about. And we were being so hypocritical to that philosophy at this time, just working like crazy, just to save money, just to live a bit of an extravagant life in California.
I think I was more okay with it than Chad was at the beginning because I was just happy to have money, frankly, and I wasn't really asking myself those existential questions about like, how am I spending my time? How am I building a life of value where I have something deeper to offer to the world? Like, those questions weren't coming up. I was just happy that we had some money. And I'm really grateful. At the time I wasn't, but I'm really grateful that Chad had this, I think we called it a crisis of consciousness, just sort of asking himself these more existential questions. And he was 37 at the time, you know, nearing 40. I think that's a pretty normal time for people to stop and ask themselves, like, what have I done here and what do I plan on doing for the rest of my time here?
And it really hit me like a ton of bricks. So we got an RV and we pulled it to Sedona, Arizona, which is where we thought would be a great place to do some soul searching, a little meditation, and kind of figure out exactly what we're going to do from here moving forward.
If you go too long without looking up, without asking yourself those more deep, profound questions about what am I doing here. You know, I could have found myself a decade in with a 10-year-old still making gnomes and kind of running myself ragged for something, I'm like hesitant to say it, but like a business I really didn't care about.
At this point, we trickled the gnome sales back to about 25% of what we were doing when we were living in California. And it was at this time in Sedona, Arizona that I stumbled across a wonderful book called the Motivation Manifesto. First book I ever read by Brendon Burchard. Read it cover to cover in like 3 days, and then we ordered like 15 copies and handed it out to everybody that we thought would vibe with it. And then just a couple months later for Christmas, Zaina got me like 5 more Burchard books. And one of those books was called Millionaire Messenger. And it was the first one I read, actually. It's a very small book, so I figured it'd be a quick, easy read. By the time I finished that book, I knew exactly what I needed to do. I knew exactly how I needed to do it. I was passionate about it, I had the drive, and I was ready to go. Basically, Millionaire Messenger lays out a blueprint to figure out what it is that you are or want to be an expert in, how to build that industry, how to do all the marketing, how to market yourself, the questions you need to be asking yourself about your clients. It's truly a wonderful read. If you are in a position where you're not exactly sure, but you know there's something over the horizon, I can't recommend Millionaire Messenger enough. One of the biggest parts of the book was to establish a business around service, not around making money, not around becoming a millionaire even, just around service. How can you serve the world and the community around you? And this leads to a much more fulfilled life.
I wrote this script yesterday when the kids were napping, and I wrote the term authenticity divide. And I guess basically what I mean by that is I don't think that your job has to be your passion, but I do think if you're building a business, especially as an entrepreneur, hi kitty. If you're building a business, especially as an entrepreneur, you want whatever you're spending your time doing to be authentic to you. And the gnomes, they just weren't, and they still aren't. Knowing that we were going to try to pivot away from this business that we had seen so much success from, had become a 6-figure business, we knew we needed to pivot into something else. And luckily at the same time, Chad was being reminded of his initial love for gardening, and specifically for hydroponic gardening.
I started a YouTube channel called Humble Growth about hydroponic gardening. My main mission is to educate and inform people about the benefits of hydroponic gardening in a world that I believe really, really needs that kind of change right now.
You know, when you have kids, you think so much about how you're showing up in the world, the example that you're setting. You can't not think about that constantly. It's exhausting, but also beautiful because it forces you to really think about how you can be the best version of yourself and how you want to show up for them. But again, at a different time and place, I think that we could have easily done the gnomes for a few years and been fine with it. And it would have been more in alignment. So I think there's a time and place for everything.
So you may be asking yourself, well, where are you now with the gnomes? Let me paint you a picture of exactly where we are right now. So we're only doing 25 gnomes a week, 100 gnomes a month. That's coming from doing 100 gnomes a week. And we're reallocating that time to focus on Humble Growth hydroponics and Butterfly Girl skincare.
You know, Humble Growth, it took a long time to come to be. It took probably about a year from when he first had the inkling or idea that that's what he wanted to spend his time building. It took a year to formulate, like, how are we actually going to make money from this, which is more important than ever when you have a family, and something that has to be considered, even though it cannot be the end-all be-all.
So my biggest takeaway would have to be, don't start a business just to make money. You know, if you just want to be a business owner, and you just want to own a business and that's your day job, then okay, that's fine. As long as you're making the times to really fill your life with zeal and the things that you're passionate about. But an entrepreneur, I believe, is different. I think an entrepreneur is someone who's trying to revolutionize instead of just run a business. And if you're trying to live in alignment with your business and the way you're making money, then don't do it for money. Do it because it's what you want to be doing. Do it because it really lights your soul on fire and you want to be living your zeal. So let's live our best life, people.
I guess I'm just going to end this off with, The last little thing that I want to say about this, because Chad and I are switching back, as you have seen throughout the course of this video with our different perspectives on this, is depending on who you are, you're going to experience life differently, right? And Chad and I viewed the success and ultimate decisions that came to follow with our business very differently. And it took us several years to get to the point where we could be on the same page about it. It took me probably 12 to 18 months after Chad has had his initial crisis of consciousness to get to the point where I fully agreed and resonated with him and that's just because I had been working the business for a much longer period at that time, where I resonated with his need to do something more fulfilling, and really got to a point where instead of resenting him over it, I was able to deeply respect him and respect the fact that he was able to think more about the future wants of our family and needs of our family and not the current needs and wants of our family. I think that's that greed element I was really able to shake, where it was like nothing is more important than the well-being of our family. And a big piece of well-being throughout the course of your life is how you're spending your time making your money, because you spend so much time doing it. So yeah, I think we're trying to keep all of these stories about us and not be preachy, because everybody has different experiences. So this is just our story. And I think the reason why it's important is because we could easily just be making that kind of money from the gnomes right now. Like, we could turn the dial up again right now if we wanted to. And we were just talking about it yesterday, like what life would look like if we were to do that. But the fact of the matter is, when you get clear, when you give yourself space to get clear, when you feel that you're being guided by something deeper, it doesn't have to be like religious, woo-woo, spiritual, just it could be yourself, it could be your own inner knowing. The answers will come, and you will find a way for the financial piece to fit into place. But you have to be willing to take risks. You have to be willing to give it time, to let go of greed, to be okay with living with less, and to be really honest about what you want out of life. And that's where we're at right now. And let me tell you, it feels really good. Way better than buying fancy heirloom tomatoes, which actually we bought a fancy heirloom tomato yesterday. So you can still have the nice things. It's just about perspective and making sure that everything matters to you if you're going to spend your time building it. That was a full-on rant. Hopefully I'm not shaking the camera too much. Let me get out of the sunspots. Let me move into the shade spots. Also put oil in my hair last night, and I can't tell if it looks greasy. It's just oiled. It's just oiled. My hair will drink that oil in the next 48 hours. And I'm stepping on something pokey in my foot. Chad's gonna love editing this. Okay. He'll talk about that. It took a year for that to come to be. I feel like there's more to say, but I don't have any